I'll do it. I'll do it.
By a bonjacry. Bonjacry.
Welcome to the edge of nowhere. Monster Lore Tour Podcast. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special 49th episode and the last deep dive of Season 1 for the Monster Lore Tour Paranormal Deep Dives from the Edge of Nowhere podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Carr, here along with my co-host and the Elliot to my E.T., Mr. Matt O'Zero, a.k.a. the Moz. How we doing today, Moz?
Elliot.
Yeah. No, you're Elliot. You're Elliot.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, to your E.T. Okay.
And how come when I phone home you never answer, Moz?
Aliens.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, ties in.
E.T. would understand that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and, on that note, you did point out to me recently that with all my talk of aliens this season, I hadn't actually done any real encounter episodes yet. No encounter stories with the aliens. I've spoken of probes and potentials of, us being aliens and aliens being here, but more big picture stuff like that. I haven't done
classic
the down and dirty nitty gritty encounter story yet.
Yep.
So to finish out season 1 here with at least with the deep dives, we do have a big season finale coming up in a couple weeks you don't want to miss. But I am going to do our first alien encounter story. So today I bring one of the wildest, most harrowing, most deep-reaching encounter abduction stories ever told to the public. This encounter is known as the Mojave Incident. The story was originally told in a book by Ron Felber titled simply Mojave Incident. The names of those involved were changed to assure their anonymity. Some claim to know the true identities of who they call the Gifford family in the book. I have no way of knowing whether that info is accurate because it's like one source without any verification or follow-up. And either way, I don't really want to be the guy to out these people in any way. Anyway, if they were trying to keep their true identity secret.
Understood.
So we are going to stick with, the names given them in the book, in Ron Felber's book. So it's not their real names, but it is,
Their real names are Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. This might be worse.
Yeah.
In a way. Or it's very similar, I guess, in a way. We'll do them at some point too, but this one's a little lesser known, so I always like to bring the lesser known stuff first. So, and as we all know, the book is always better. So we're going to give you a really good breakdown of the experiences of the Giffords and the Mojave and beyond, but there's a lot of stuff in Mr. Felber's book that we just don't have time to get to here with our format. So if you end up wanting to know more about the Mojave Incident after this episode, definitely make sure to pick up a copy of Mojave Incident by Ron Felber. All right, but before we really get into this, we got to take care of our typical business, by which I mean old business. You have a piece for us, Moz?
Yeah, I kind of struck out on the abyss front. We were talking about, you came up with abyss totems, the Abian, which was also the Philippine Yek or Aikla or totem or helper spirit. And we thought that's a really cool etymological thing to look into and find out there's a real connection. Abyss, Latin for abyssos, bottomless pit. On the Philippine side, did not find anything. I'll maybe have to keep looking, or if we have someone in that side of the world who can give us a hand and help us out, if there's any connection to Abian and abyss.
Yeah, it's the question is, what is, where did that word actually originate? Because we have our western route for abyss.
Right. We wanted the Philippines.
If you're in the Philippines and that's a similar word, yeah, I mean, is it coincidence or, I mean,
well, the Spanish brought a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it got brought over and then turned into that, you know what I mean? It's just the spelling, the ABYAN and the ABYSS.
Yep.
You know, it really had that feel of
maybe
someone from
weird.
the abyss is an Abian.
Yeah. We talk like that. That's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk funny.
Yeah. Elliot. You do talk funny.
Yeah.
Say stuff like that.
And one other piece of old business, as we were editing the previous episode about the Manangal, if you haven't heard it, it's about some self-segmenting monsters that fly around with their guts hanging out and their bottom parts left behind. We were editing, and I think we figured out finally why, when they detach, they bring just the digestive tract basically with them, whether it be the torso detaching or just the head or whatever it may be. They always bring their digestive tract dangling out beneath them. It was something you said, Maz, when we were editing, and I was listening to it again. You said they do this so they can go out to eat. They go out to feed. And I was like, oh, they need the place where the food goes.
Right.
So they can bring the food back to the body properly.
Yeah, in 2 episodes of Philippine Folklores, I don't think I clarified that, so I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah. One of those points that's easy to overlook, but it's like knowing why they do what they do actually makes it a little less horrifying, I think.
Yeah.
They're not just purposefully flapping their guts around to freak you out. They need them to put the food in when they eat.
That's part of the dealio.
Yeah. So. And then when they go back to the body, it goes back in and the nutrients can go into the rest of the body.
Yeah, it makes so sense, physiologically and anatomically. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Some of that stuff got a little not so much sense in that department. But.
Yeah. All right, so anyone who's still with us after that little bit, if you could do us a favor and just hit some of those happy little fun buttons on whatever platform you're on, like, subscribe, maybe share with some friends. If you have a minute, maybe leave us a rating and review. We appreciate any feedback you can give us.
But check out the Philippine Folklore episodes. They were a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, totally. That was a great way for you to finish your deep dives for the season, no doubt.
It was a blast.
Yeah, that was one of the more horrifying monster creature feature episodes you've done so far, I would say.
Good times.
All right, but let's get into the Mojave Incident for real now. The tale we are about to tell is that of Tom and Elise Gifford. It takes place mostly in 1989 into the early 1990s, but its roots go back a bit further than that. Our tale truly begins back when Tom Gifford was the spry young age of 15. This is 1975, 14 years prior to the encounter known as the Mojave Incident. Tom and his family were on a camping trip with his friend Keith's family. Tom was raised an outdoorsman, his father taking him on annual hunting trips and spending a lot of time out camping and such. On this particular trip, they were camped out near Lake Mojave, so they could do some fishing. It was a common spot for the Giffords to get away for a few days. Tom had been there many times in his childhood. One night late, Tom takes Keith to the lakeshore to do some night fishing, a prime time to catch some good fish. It is a common enough scenario, these people in this place doing these things, but Tom feels oddly uncomfortable in the moment. When he stops to consider the feeling, he realizes what it is. He feels as though he is being watched. You speak of this phenomenon sometimes, Maz, the fact that people can actually feel eyes on them. They've done like laboratory type tests.
Well, they're called laboratories now. They
Laboratory.
Have, like, the little buzz thing.
Yes, master.
The bud switch. It's not like that anymore. My understanding.
I'm sorry, master.
Master.
Master. Yes, master. I will do better from now on, master.
No, it really is.
I am sorry to disturb you in your laboratory, master.
I think it is actually an important point because back in the day, we always had this, I felt like I was being watched, and people go, shrugged their shoulders. if studies are starting to suggest that people really can tell when they're being watched, even when they shouldn't be able to, and I need to look more into those studies since it keeps coming up, I want to get more detail-oriented with that.
Sure.
But at the same time, if it's starting to suggest we can do that, that's not something very easily explainable by our normal Western reductionistic, view of the world.
Like literally feeling the vibes,
And it's important to monster theory that people seem to know when they're being watched by something menacing.
And it's not a thing like, supposed full-on psychic abilities and things like that where, some people, one out of every so many people might have this ability to look into other people and stuff. This is something everybody's familiar with.
Right.
You say, oh man, I feel like I'm being watched. Everyone knows what you mean.
Yeah, it's like deja vu.
It's like the hair in the back of your neck starts standing up. Yeah, like deja vu.
I just had a feeling I said deja vu on this podcast. What would we call that?
Repetitiveness.
Oh, yeah, I got that down.
But anywho, but we're talking about Tom here out in the middle of nowhere having this sensation of eyes on him.
That area, real quick, like Lake Mojave is just when we're driving to Vegas, it's off to the right. It's that whole Colorado River running along to the Hoover Dam. It looks like Mars.
California, Nevada.
Yeah, well, it's north.
It's near the California border.
Yeah,
in
Needles
Nevada.
and
yeah. There you go. Needles
but basically, that area looks like the moon.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a spooky joint.
A shrubby moon.
Yeah.
It's got a little shrubbiness to it, though, doesn't it?
Well, when you get near the Hoover Dam where Lake Mojave is, it really is starts to be those big mountains as you climb up towards Hoover Dam.
Sure.
It is very otherworldly, I would say.
Yeah. So the boys reach the shore and set up their fishing lines. Then, just as the boys are working on hooking their first fish, Tom looks up and realizes the source of his unease. This is a passage from the aforementioned book Mojave Incident by Ron Felber. He sees it first in the recesses of his mind's eye before his eyes lift to the top of the mountain range. The large, shiny orb stares down at them with the magnetic engagement of a human eye, staring, watching. The size of a basketball, even from across the lake, it rises up from behind the mountain, perhaps 500 yards, then sets itself stationary, boldly, for anyone to see. Stunned for the moment, the two boys watch, mesmerized, as the blinding white light darts from its position due east to one directly due north before their minds can register what their eyes have seen. As the boys stand transfixed, the desert around them goes silent. Not a bird, not a bug, not the slightest wisp of wind. Just silence. Then the orb moves toward them. In a burst of fearful flurry, they snatch up their fishing gear and run for fear of what is coming for them. Tom looks back and sees the orb spinning oblong like an egg, and the light grows brighter as the orb nears. It is catching up with them quickly, too quickly. In his panic, Tom crashes into Keith and they tumble to the ground. Keith regains his footing quickly and bolts toward camp. Tom rolls onto his back and stares deep into the glowing orb as it overtakes him. Here is what happened in Tom's own words from Mojave Incident. I remember we both fell on the ground. I stayed right there in the dirt, paralyzed, unable to move a muscle, while Keith got up and ran away. Then it just floated above me. Without a sound, the UFO just hovered over me, shining this light. A white light so bright I'll never forget it, but one you could stare right into without blinking, without it hurting your eyes at all. I don't know what happened after that, but early the next morning I found myself back at the campsite. Keith was asleep, so I didn't wake him. But hours later, when he awakened, he didn't remember a thing. Not the sighting, or even us running from it like we did. Nothing. And so life went on. Tom never spoke of the incident again, and eventually he just stopped thinking about it entirely. He kept on going into the wilds with his family. He kept on camping and fishing and hunting. And it is his love of hunting that led to the events we will be discussing today. But first, let me get your input on that initial encounter story. And we discussed it a little bit. What stood out to you in 15-year-old Tom's encounter, Moss?
Well, the oblong, it sounds a little tic-tacky. You can almost see something tumbling.
Ooh, like a spinning tic-tac, making it look egg-shaped.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's really what he's getting at, but that's kind of where my mind went. And I did think it was a little odd the way they treated it the next morning. I know my friends, I would have been, okay, so you just left me out there, like no one came back for me, like I just had to climb back to the tent.
I kind of blew by that part, but he does, like, he tries asking Keith about it. Like,
oh, so yeah, you read the
Keith
whole book. Yeah.
Didn't remember
anything.
Like,
so
he's like, what
end.
are you talking about?
It was a dead end. Yeah, you did kind of say that, yeah.
He was like, man, what was that last night? And he's like, what was what?
Yeah.
And he's like, seriously? Yeah. And he's like, okay, maybe I'll just shut up.
There you go. And that could happen. That could be a way you handle that. Yes.
Yeah, it was because, I mean, it's the whole, oh, maybe I'm just crazy thing that people get a lot with these stories. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have verification, it's like, oh, maybe I just imagined it or something.
Yeah, as a kid.
And the fact that Keith didn't remember it,
yeah.
Tom is then, oh boy, am I just crazy? Like, did that not actually happen? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those wrenches they throw in the works on us. You know, they only leave one person with the memory, and when the other people don't remember, it makes the person who remembers look like a crazy person.
Yeah.
It's a good trick. It's good psyops, you know?
I like it.
Anywho.
We've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Last trip to Vegas. Same
Those
idea.
damn dirty psyops, man. All right, now let's jump backwards down the number line here, back to the year 1989, where we find a grown-up Tom Gifford, age 29. Tom has the whole American dream thing going for him pretty well at this point. He and his now wife, Elise, are on their second baby. He's got a good job that he actually enjoys. They have a house. They have family around to help with the kids. You know, no one is ever without their problems, but the Giffords at this point seem to be doing about as well as anyone could hope to be. But in October of 1989, there is something bothering Tom. Something gnawing away at the back of his brain, not letting him think clearly about other things. It is, of course, as it would be for any lifelong hunter, the memory of the one that got away. Tom was out on a hunt not long before, and the big, beautiful buck he'd been tracking all season had slipped through his proverbial fingers and sent Tom home empty-handed. Big 4-point buck. It was something Tom wasn't going to get over easily. So he made an event of it. He would take Elise away for the weekend and combine it with the second round of tracking down the prized buck that was now living rent-free in Tom's head. This wasn't exactly Elise's idea of a romantic getaway, however. She wasn't supportive of the hunting idea to begin with, and certainly didn't want to be a part of the process. But Tom played her with talk of fun of other kinds along the way, and Elise was enough of an outdoorsman to appreciate some time alone in the desert and the sights to be seen along the way, so she ultimately agreed. Tom was ecstatic. This time would be different. This time he would get his prize. So it was, on October 20th, 1989, Tom and Elise Gifford left the kids with the grandparents and headed off on their desert adventure. And an adventure it turned out to be, indeed, for their road did not lead directly to the hunting grounds.
Or the happy hunting grounds.
Yeah. That first night brought them into Nevada, to a place called Whiskey Pete's, where they partook of some good old-fashioned gambling, dancing, and drinking. Getting a little Wild Westy with it, you know how it is, Moss.
I'm more of a pioneer saloon man myself. Good
yeah,
Springs.
That's Wild Westy too, though.
That's true.
Drink a little rye.
Yeah.
Oh, and I should have mentioned that they were traveling in their camper-backed truck, so they aren't staying at Whiskey Pete's or anything like that. They're just passing through in the end. So once they've had their fill of fun for the evening, they head back out, or should I say, back into the desert. It has been raining.
See, kids, you should never leave the saloon. It's safe in there.
Yeah. It's safe at Whiskey Pete's. It's been raining, so the desert dirt roads they are now traveling have become treacherous from flowing waters and banks of fog. And as they come around a bend, Tom nearly wrecks the truck as its nose plunges into a freshly filled ravine of water flowing across the road. Thankfully, he is able to recover the vehicle from the wash, but his resolve to reach the campground for which they are headed that night has depleted. and they spend the first night in the truck in the middle of nowhere, waiting for the water to run its course. The next morning, Elise wakes to a smiling Tom and fresh hot coffee. He knows what he's doing out there, and they have a leisurely morning of making their way through the desert, taking in the beauty of the landscape and Tom doing some preliminary scouting for his hunt. By mid-afternoon, they finally make it to the campground for which they've been bound from the beginning. And wouldn't you know it, but the campground is completely full. No vacancy sign was flashing, if it had one. Which I'm sure it didn't, but because, it's middle of nowhere campground, but you know what I'm saying. This is a major wrench in the works for Tom's compromised plan of hunting/vacation weekend, because Elise had demanded at least some basic facilities. She didn't want to totally be roughing it. Now, they had spent the first night in the middle of the desert, and the rest of the trip was now in jeopardy of being nothing but roughing it as well. So Elise was not thrilled. It seems they have been destined for disaster the whole time, but she agrees to carry on, sally forth, grin and bear it. You know how it is. And they head out into the Mojave Desert to find their place for the weekend. Dun, dun, dun. Excuse me. And again, Tom proves his expert outdoorsmanship, finds them a lovely camping spot with a wide open desert vista for them to marvel at. They get camp all set up and prepare to have a dinner cooked over their own little fire. It is all so wonderfully pleasant that Elise seems to be getting over her disappointments. But as Tom is at the fireside cooking dinner, he is suddenly overcome with a sense of unease. He suddenly feels like he's being watched, which was quite odd indeed given the isolation of their location. Not another human soul around for a good 15 miles. Is this starting to sound familiar, Moth?
Yeah, I still don't know the study. I will, though.
Yeah. A tingle of terrible memory twitched at the base of Tom's thoughts as he turned to scope the landscape. He saw nothing at first, but as his eyes turned upward, scanning the cliffs of a nearby mountain, he saw at the top, near the peak, a sight that froze him to the core and sent the memories of that 1975 encounter rushing back into his mind. He could remember every little detail, down to the stinging of the cut on his face from when he fell in the dirt just before the rest of the night disappeared. He did a double take, and before his eyes and mind could fully register the all-too-familiar object, it slid down behind the mountain peak. He tried to ignore it, tell himself he was imagining, that it wasn't really there, but he knew it was, and he knew what it was, and it was too much for him to bear. Elise sensed the change in him, but he played it off the best he could. The whole while his mind was racing, arguing with itself over what he just saw, but he knew the truth. It was the same as what he had seen in 1975. He knew it, no matter how much he wanted to deny it.
Is there more description in the book of the first encounter with the oblong thing? It doesn't sound like a match. He just knows it's the same thing.
It's the glowing orb in the sky that he saw the first time.
But one was more oblong. I don't know. Is it?
He only saw that once it was down close, chasing him and spinning.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. The craft wasn't showing itself again, so Tom carried on with dinner, and they enjoyed steaks and a bottle of wine next to the open fire under the clear desert sky. Sounds downright pleasant. Enough so that Tom was able to squash his tensions for a bit and show off some of his astronomical knowledge over s'mores. But as Elise was searching the sky, questioning Tom about the constellations and stars, she suddenly spotted something very odd. Just over the mountain peak, she saw a constellation that was not made of stars.
Musk.
Yeah, Starlink, right? Here is a passage from Mojave Incident by Ron Felber. In the sky, some 200 yards to their right, straight up and set like diamond studs in the ceiling of a dome, were 9 objects shining so intensely they created daylight around them. As Elise watched them, she said, "They look like mylar. See how shiny? And they must be connected, because they're moving together like pearls on a string.
Musk.
Mirrored men. Tom tries the oldest trick in the book and told her they were weather balloons. And this is 1989, by the way.
No, I know. There's no Starlink. I'm just musking over here.
Oh, gross. You're musking again? I hate when you do that. Stinks up the garage, dude.
Have to mark my territory somehow.
Anywho, Tom tries the oldest trick in the book and told her they were weather balloons. But Elise wasn't buying it. She sat by the fire, silent now, watching the lights, sipping her wine in wonder at what she was seeing. They continued watching the mystery lights for some time, Tom with growing trepidation, knowing what he was seeing. Elise with a more relaxed curiosity, thinking it's some sort of odd celestial event as much as anything more malicious, although the possibility of foreign or even alien invasion did cross her mind. After some time, Elise pointed to the sky and said to Tom, quote, "They're blinking to one another like some kind of communication." She turned to Tom, suddenly bug-eyed. "They're not stars, and they're no weather balloons." This is when Tom switches from the oldest trick in the book to the second oldest trick in the book, experimental military aircraft. In their situation here, this isn't too bad an excuse, actually, much better than the weather balloons.
Not too far from Area 51. They are.
Yeah, because when you're in the Mojave, like that whole desert is surrounded by secret installations making secret things.
That's true.
So, like, blaming it on secret military stuff in the Mojave, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fallback position, but, you know, it's hard to argue against it
Yep.
in any given situation,
No
put it that
argument.
way. So, yeah, if I were seeing weird lights in the sky over the Mojave, my first reaction would probably be to blame the military, you know, at this point. But this case is a little different because Tom knew all too well what he was looking at from his previous experience. So as they debated the possible natures of these craft, Tom and Elise watched the lights move into position directly above them, blinking their messages to each other the whole time, as if coordinating some sort of action. As their fear swelled, the lights did the most passively frightening thing they could do. They disappeared. All 9 of them, in perfect synchronicity, simply blinked out of existence.
Did he think about getting in the camper at this point, or?
They're getting there.
I'm in the chopper.
Well, because
Jeremy's going to go talk to the
Tom's in denial,
military people.
right? Tom's in denial. He doesn't want to accept what's happening.
Yeah, he doesn't want to link the link.
Right. And Elise doesn't know yet what's happening.
Yeah.
She's figuring it out as it occurs. But this is the moment. Just all of a sudden, boom, all 9 of them gone. Like someone flipped a switch.
Right.
Leaving there in the sky above them, nothing but dark void. Just gone. But within a moment of checking their surroundings, they saw them again. Here's another quote. Just west of them, perhaps 400 yards away and several thousand feet up, the 9 craft had repositioned themselves on the horizon just over the crest of the mountain range in the form of a large M. As you mentioned previously, here we see a kind of tick-tacky movement, don't we, Maz? They just jumped from one place to the next, like crossed the horizon.
Sure,
real
wasn't
quick.
the M at the top of the mountain range for like Mojave? They do that in towns in the West. They make they make the letter out of rocks.
The white rock letter.
Yeah.
No, this is up over the mountain.
Okay.
So,
Give me an M.
Mojave. We got to go put an OZ after it
There you go.
for Maz.
They're getting there.
But it was now too obvious that the Giffords were dealing with something far beyond weather balloons or even next-gen military craft. Tom could no longer deny the truth he had known the whole time. And suddenly, as they stared gaping at the sky, more lights appeared. And more, quickly more and more, until hundreds of these lights were filling the sky above them, all still blinking their ominous messages to each other. And if that weren't bad enough, these lights began to descend. Oh, so slowly and equally unstoppable, the lights began to drift groundward. I imagine it was like all the stars in the sky suddenly descending down to where you can literally reach out and touch them. There was nothing else for it to be. Tom and Elise were witnessing a full-scale alien invasion. Tom stomped out the fire and they ran for the truck. There was nowhere to go. The road in was too harrowing in the daylight. Traversing those rutted dirt roads in the dark with their oversized camper truck would be too slow going to make any sort of getaway. And how can you run from so many things that can move like that? They were trapped like rats in a cage.
Despite all their rage.
They watched out the camper windows as hundreds of these lit-up craft landed in the desert valley they had so recently thought so beautiful.
Yeah, it changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's scary now. Tom reached for his guns, the weapons with which he had so much skill, but they knew they would be useless against this enemy. There was no use in fighting back. As though to make sure they understood this, Elise began receiving messages in her mind from the invaders, basically advising her against any attempt to resist their captors. These at first subtle persuasions turned into what felt like an invasion of their minds on the scale of the invasion of the valley going on outside. A voice was in their heads, suggesting, leading, controlling their thoughts. It was most disconcerting, let me tell you. Like rats in a cage, they peered helplessly out the windows to see what would happen next. Have another passage here from Mojave Incident by Ron Felber. You want to read this one for us, Mos?
Sure. The brilliant white objects had it all landed now, and the sky was chillingly empty of light, devoid entirely of either stars or moon. But the valley, dark and sprawling, corralled by the shadowy outlines of the enormous mountainscapes, was filled, overrun from several feet away to hundreds of yards beyond with thousands of pairs of red eyes glowing in the dark around them. Wow.
Glowing red eyes, Mos.
Now we're talking my country here.
Yeah, seemingly thousands of pairs of them filling the landscape around them.
Yeah, because Mothman just had 2, and that's kind of boring. You might want to up that number.
Usually you only see 2, and that's creepy enough. Yeah. Think about 2,000, 20,000. Who even knows how many of them they're looking at from that description?
It kind of reminds me of Watership Down with that black rabbit.
And with the demon rabbits?
The rabbits with the red eyes in the field.
Yeah, that's a good call, actually.
Mojave Ship Down.
Mojave. Oh, no. Anywho. But think about it. So many craft, so many beings. The sky suddenly devoid of moon and stars after the descent. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? There was a starry desert sky, and now it's literally just black.
Yeah.
We are going to get more into this.
The whole thing does seem a little Alice in the one looking glass kind of things have just gone completely off the rails.
Ooh,
you know, because if there's that much in the sky, even in a remote area, depending on, because sometimes you don't know how high things really are. If they're 100 feet and there's a bunch of them.
That's very true.
If they're orbit level and there's a bunch of them, people are seeing this from 95 and 10, and I mean 40 rather.
Right.
So I don't know. Like,
this does have the feel of the lights starting pretty low, though. Like they're just kind of just up over the mountain peak, which is high enough in the desert for people to see from very far away because it's such a wide open sky, not much, to block your view most of the time. But it's not like these don't sound like they came from up in orbit. Like they didn't appear until they were like just down over the mountain range, But I will say this, red is more of a shapeshiftery, cryptidy kind of thing we come across. It's not an alien eye very often. It can happen, of course. I'm not sure what that can be. There's a lot of interesting elements to this.
Flatwoods monster. I'm trying to think what might else have red eyes.
Yeah, but this goes beyond your typical alien encounter. It's what drew me to it as my first one. But this is where our encounter story begins in earnest. Tom and Elise are now veritably face to face with these alien beings, and so isolated and outnumbered that they can do nothing but wait and see what will become of them. I really do imagine there is no more helpless feeling one could feel than that. Now, it turns out that these invaders are not apparently of the same species, not even close by our feeble human perceptions. There's a few different kinds of aliens involved here. First, there are the guards, as I came to think of them. 2 beings posted outside the camper, keeping a constant, vigilant watch on every move the Giffords make. These beings seem to be made entirely of energy. They are described in the book as grayish blue, like electric images forming and unforming. That, to me, is extremely reminiscent of the Glimmerman, which we discussed in my previous episode, Cryptoid Palooza, just a few weeks ago. So, implications there. We'll get into that later. They seem to be a bit more solid, at least visually, than your typical Glimmerman, but as they are in a position of not needing to camouflage themselves, it could be that the Giffords were actually seeing two Glimmermen in their truest form. And they were still seeming to fade in and out of the Giffords' perceptions. Like they could see him, not see him, see him, not see him. But like they were there, but they weren't.
Right.
It's a very ephemeralistic nature to these things. The most numerous of the invaders appeared in a form that Moz may find more interesting. These creatures are legion. They're making up most of those sets of eyes that they're seeing out in the valley. And they seem to be the workers of the operation. In the book, they are described thusly: like gremlins, no larger than 3 feet in height, with heads the size of a cat's, translucent torsos, and thin diaphanous limbs. Their eyes, fierce and malevolent, pierced the night as a pack of them climbed the branches of a nearby mesquite tree, while others frolicked like child monsters amid the sagebrush and juniper that shrouded the desert wash. There's your Puckwudgie.
Your creature features, yeah.
Your little 3 foot
But they
tall,
come from
crazy
the sky. I mean, they come from the earth. These things come from the sky.
These are ephemeral, translucent Puckwudgies.
It's such a mishmash of different things going on here. It
wild.
Does seem more hallucinatory offhand, but
yeah, there's a lot coming. There's a lot more coming. Then Elise and Tom started testing each other, describing in detail to each other what they were seeing to know they were seeing the same thing. This is actually a very smart strategy to employ when encountering any sort of the unknown with a friend. Hey, do you see that? Yeah, what is that? Describe it to each other and see if you're actually seeing the same details. Sometimes you'll see something different, and that makes it even weirder. But this is how Tom describes them in the book. Quote, dwarves, kind of like monkeys, but evil. I can feel the evil, see it in those eyes. They're playing like wild kids, running up and around the camper into the wooded area and brush of the foothills and in the tree over there. But they must be weightless, because the branches, the limbs of the mesquite, even the thinnest ones, aren't bending. What do you think about that, Moz?
Well, the only thing I will say about that is in the end of Owl Week in season 2, I do one of my big events that happened to me. And I'll say this, I was surrounded by something, and I didn't hear a leaf rustle, a snap, crack. I mean, there was things there that did not seem to be interacting at all with our planet. So
with
I've
our
been there.
Physical reality.
Yeah, so I've been there for that one. So that's one piece of it I can say. I had something similar happen to me.
I think I have a name for these guys. I'm going to call them Glimmerwudgies.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
You got to patent that.
Glimmerwudgies.
Yeah. If you become a Patreon member, you can get a Glimmerwudgie.
Ooh.
I'll send you once a year.
We'll have to make a t-shirt.
Well,
just keep that in mind for Wolfman Pucks later. Anywho, it seems like these aliens had a particularly unpleasant odor as well. A distinct stink of sulfur filled the air as the invasion filled the valley. This is actually something you hear from most alien encounter stories, a sort of stink in the air, sulfury and little nauseous kind of smell.
Rotten eggs.
Yeah. Now that the ground forces were all in position, the Giffords got to witness the next horrifying sight, the descent of the mothership. Here is how the Giffords described the craft in Ron Felber's book. You want to read this one for us, Moz?
It, the spacecraft, huge, descending from out of a dense cloud, the object literally capped the valley, then stopped, hovering perhaps 100 yards above the desert floor. The craft was more than a football field in diameter and shaped like a disc with an elevated dome that rose up from its center. It was encircled with brilliant white lights, flashing in what appeared to be coordinated, coded rhythms.
When the mothership finally got within view, it lowered some sort of probe. It was huge, a good 200 feet wide and round, like some sort of platform. When the platform hit the ground, it appeared to start beaming up all kinds of local objects, from plants to animals to stones. It seemed to be harvesting all of the objects the desert had to offer. It was a tunnel of light lifting objects into the belly of the ship, just like we have seen in so many sci-fi movies throughout the history of sci-fi movies. Just on a more massive scale than we would typically imagine. But there was something odd about the objects being tractor-beamed up to the mothership. They seemed as ephemeral as the glimmer guards in the hordes of gremlin monkeys, or Glimmerwudgies. Elise describes them as, quote, patterns of things more than actual physical objects. Things like plants and cattle, cactus, and even trees.
So it almost has that feel of, we've got all these dots, almost in an Antarctic hallucination, where you have these visions and patterns and brilliance, and it has an hallucinatory feel to it, to me.
I almost had more of a feel of we're looking at hackers breaking into our matrix and stealing our code.
Oh,
it's almost like a simulation theory thing, like it's an invasion from a parallel simulation, or a competing program of some kind.
Mojave Morpheus project.
Yeah,
I got
like weirdness, or maybe just some sort of, they're copying the pattern of it, like stealing its DNA, and so to speak, for lack of better vocabulary for the situation.
Well, I have more questions when we get to question section, because I want to know a little bit more about how this information got to this author. But
we get to that as we go. And to make things worse, this was not the only function being performed by the mothership. It also appeared to be doing some sort of drilling, or maybe scanning the Earth with some sort of hyper-advanced LiDAR, which is like ground-penetrating radar. Here again is how Elise Gifford described what she saw. There's a triangle of lights with the tip touching down on the ground. It seems to be combing the ground beneath the disc as if searching for something. Do you hear the rumbling? Deep inside the ground, the triangle is like a drill, a huge drill of some kind. Once the troops were all in place and the probes, or whatever they were up and running and doing their thing, the focus of the alien operation seemed to turn more to the Giffords. It is impossible to say whether the aliens chose that time to invade because they had a couple of human captives to poke and prod and probe while they were there. Maybe even because it was specifically the Giffords themselves who were there.
Right.
Or if the Giffords' presence was just a sort of happy accident that the invaders decided to take full advantage of, but take advantage of it they certainly did. The aliens now began probing the Giffords' minds and memories in a most intrusive sort of way.
The Mind Ripper.
Yeah, it's a little crazy here, man. It was at this point that the Giffords were introduced to a third sort of invader. Here is how they are described by the Giffords in Ron Felber's book. You want to read this one for us, Moz?
Tom knew immediately that these were the ones responsible for the telepathic messages. They arrived in a group of 9 circling the camper, staring in the window of its shell like spectators observing animals in a zoo. Taller than the others, they stood perhaps 5 feet in height, with enormous raven black eyes and long spindly appendages connected to an underdeveloped torso the size of a 3-year-old child's. Elise stared into the face of one of them, if only for a second, but it was long enough to brand a searing image that will stay in her mind forever.
Interesting that there were 9 of these apparent officers in charge of this army. They definitely reminded me of the Nazgul.
Yeah.
Another thing to note real quick before we move on. We're comparing the guards to the Glimmermen, right? What if these guys are actually 3 mirrored men instead of 9 creatures? They're 3 mirrored men without their suits on. Because the mirrored men are the ones that steal your time, get into your head.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what these guys are in this story. I came into this thinking I was going to be talking about my previous alien stuff, mostly in this, but it led me more down into talking about Cryptoid Palooza, my previous episode. Something to think about. Whatever they are, this third class of alien began to probe the Giffords' minds for all of their memories. This is not just a forced remembering of things best left forgotten. This is a full-on reliving of various landmark moments throughout their lives, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. The litany of memories, the full spectrum of emotion, is all told in the book. For our purposes, we'll just focus on the most impactful few. For Tom, they start with the memory of his 1975 encounter that we opened with. Right. As though they are reintroducing themselves and confirming his suspicions that these are in fact the same intruders as before. They then run through a range of experiences, his best and worst of times. There seems to be a focus on both emotions and sex. The primary experience for Tom turns out to not be one of his memories at all, but the experience of the hunt from the perspective of the prey. Tom stands majestic on a rise in the early morning light. All is good and right with the world, when all of a sudden he is pierced with heat and pain. He's been shot by a hunter he can now hear in the distance. There are more hunters and dogs with them. Tom runs for his life. He is tracked relentlessly, shot repeatedly, each time the hunters draw near. But still he runs, fighting for distance, fighting to stay alive. But it is no use. For the prey, once wounded, is destined to be run down. The experience in Tom's mind ends this way, as told in the book. Quote, he feels the jab and puncture of a cold steel blade just below his sternum, then hears the tear of flesh as the knife rips downward to his pelvic bone and a gush of warm blood floods his thighs and genitals. The last thought that crosses Tom's mind comes quietly and with a vague sense of surprise. My God, he thinks, they're skinning me alive. For Elise, they bring forth her worst fear, the reliving of a sexual abuse she endured when still just a child. It is a truly horrific scene that we will not describe in any more detail here, but it's all in the book. Let's just say it's as bad as it gets. Again, they end up running Elise through the gamut of emotions with a similar focus on the range of feelings, particularly when it comes to sex. They're kind of sex-oriented in a way. It's weird.
Like dreams and like hallucinations, like visions.
Yeah, very Freudian, I guess. But these experiences, these relivings...
Sometimes a cigar-shaped UFO is just a cigar-shaped UFO.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an interdimensional hypercube.
No, it's a cigar-shaped.
I'm sorry, hypercylinder?
There you go. That would work.
These experiences, these relivings, it is a full takeover of their mind. Elise and Tom have zero control over their own minds while it's happening. They are terrified by the experience, and the way these beasts take turns, taking over one mind, then the other, and letting the other watch each other's sufferings and seizures, it almost seems like part of the experiment. A test of the human range of emotion, sensation, experience, and everything else that makes us human. It was almost like they were being brought to the edge of death to have their lives flash before them, but just for a few minutes at a time, like truly torturous stuff.
Like night terror.
Okay. Maz is building all kinds of theories over here. And maybe worst of all, they both were given the sense that their children would somehow be involved in this. Like the children would be experimented with like their parents were being.
Telepathically.
Very telepathic stuff going on. All it's much more mental than it is physical. But they were both made distraught, wondering what was happening back home, losing their minds with terror and fear, in between having their minds ripped away from themselves. Elise Gifford describes it this way, quote, they wanted everything we had, everything. Our minds, our bodies, even our souls, I think. It was like they drew it out of us with a syringe, every molecule. And it was painful. And I thought we were going to die, or had already died, and were being tortured in hell. So there's a little perspective into their mind state in the moment, Moss. Like, it's as bad as it gets, you know, seventh circle of hell kind of torture.
Well, while I'm thinking of it, I mean, astral attack stuff does mimic, you know, this stuff as well.
Yeah, the psychic vampire kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Yep. And then when you thought things just couldn't get any worse, the fog rolled in.
Was Adrienne Barbeau or Jamie Lee Curtis in this part of it?
The mental and emotional torture had pushed them to their limit. The Giffords were discussing ending it all before it could get any worse, for they already couldn't take the suffering. Then an odd vapor rolled in through the camper windows, mixing with the nearly choking stink of sulfur that still lingered everywhere around them. As they breathed it in, a change came over them. A sense of calm infused their bodies. Their breathing slowed, their heartbeats normalized, and their fear receded enough to keep them from doing the worst. It seemed the invaders wanted to keep them not only alive, but sedated. This mental anguish went on for some time, an infinity to the Giffords, suffering through every extended second. And just when it seemed they would be pushed over the brink by their suffering, their captors suddenly retreated into the dark desert as quickly as they had come. It appeared that whatever they had come for had been done. The Giffords were suddenly alone again in the great expanse of the Mojave. That's when they did a very natural thing. They thanked God for their sudden and most unexpected rescue. They thanked God, they said some prayers of thanks. And just as quickly as they had gone, the invaders came storming back, going berserk, all up and around their camper with what seemed a whole new level of vigor.
The experiment continues.
Right? It so seems like a scientific experiment.
Hey, they're doing the religious thing now.
Yeah.
Hey, but turn the thing around.
Just another test to see how they would react emotionally when they left. Like, oh, let's walk away and see how they react. Or could this be a reaction to their sensing of the religion in the Giffords' minds?
Right.
They were made to relive some memories related to church and stuff, but this may have been the first time the invaders sensed actual religion in the human mind. Would this have been enough to make them come back and continue their experiments?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought there, boss.
Yepper.
But regardless of the reasoning, things just kept getting worse and weirder. A crowd of the gremlin-like creatures, I'm just going to call them Glimmerwudgies.
Yeah, let's do it.
A crowd of the Glimmerwudgies were making a ruckus outside the camper, when suddenly one of the energy beings floated to the front of the mob. It pointed a finger into the camper, and a small orb of crackling electric light floated out from its fingertips. It was only about the size of a pea, but it was ominous enough as it floated toward Elise, and she shrieked as it suddenly implanted itself in her abdomen. And just as this next horror was taking shape in the camper, the full-on abduction phase began. And this isn't your typical grab them with a tractor beam and pull the humans into the ship. This goes way beyond that. And once again, raises the question as to the actual nature of this purported craft. Is it even of this dimension? The abduction is described by the Giffords thusly. You want to read this, Moz?
The reality was different from anything either could have imagined. Both believed the truck and the entire environment around it was being lifted up into a vast collection center inside the mother ship. Elise says, "There's air beneath us. The scenery hasn't changed, but it's like we're suspended somewhere, like they've separated us from the earth and put us into some kind of a vast museum."
That's right, Moz. It appears, at least to the perspective of the Giffords, that the entire valley around them has been lifted into the ship along with them in the camper. Have you ever heard of an account with that element before?
Not to that level, you know. I mean, like I said, a lot of these kind of take on a quality of how we get into the operating room, how do we get here, and it's just a flash of light, it's a this, it's a that.
Right.
But this seems more
You know,
like they're aware of what's going on to describe it,
Yeah, I
which
think-
is almost odd.
honestly, the problem with a lot of abduction stories is the lost time element. People just can't remember.
Yeah, when they do, it's in flashes. And that's why I
Yeah.
want to know how this was related to the author, because I think that's an important piece.
We get to that. We do get to that. But once the desert is lifted into the alien collection craft, the Giffords meet yet another type of visitor. This being is described by the Giffords as, quote, a being that in other times may have been called an angel. She was radiant, exquisite in appearance and nature, her robe flowing as she floated gracefully toward them. This angelic creature filled the Giffords with an overwhelming sense of peace and purpose. They suddenly felt that their presence there was necessary, important, like they had been chosen for some important quest. Then they were both suddenly exhausted. They climbed into the bed of their camper and quickly fell into deep, deep sleep. The next thing they remember is waking up the next morning in the bed of their camper. The Mojave Valley spread out around them under a clear desert sky, as though none of it had ever happened. So ends the account of the Giffords' alien encounter in the Mojave. But this tale is still far from over, for what seems to be an end of the thing is really just the beginning.
This is when the dog leaves the base and they shoot it at it with from the helicopter. That's
Correct.
Between thing 1 and thing 2. Yeah. Between is where the monsters are. Between thing 1 and thing 2. They need a movie for that.
Ooh, that's pretty good, actually. The Giffords seemed to be the only witnesses to the horrors of the Mojave invasion by these species of unidentified invaders. They returned home, returned to the world. Everything was different for them now, and not for the better. Tom started losing his grip on things, but who could blame him after what they had experienced out there? Here is how the book describes his mental state after the encounter. He remembered the rawness of his desperation while being hunted, and the calculated deliberation of his stalker, and wondered if he was not the same victim of prey to the creatures he had encountered. The experience left him questioning everything about humanity and religion, about himself. How petty everything seemed when compared to the magnitude of them, the monster saviors he had met and now believed had been visiting the East Mojave for generations.
I thought them were over in New Mexico. Big ants.
Yeah, that's the ant styles. But Tom's reality was, in short, shattered. And Elise's mental state wasn't faring any better. It didn't help that she found 2 mysterious marks on her neck the morning after the incident, something like needle marks. She was paranoid about her and Tom's safety, but even more so that of the children. Afraid to so much as let them out of her sight, she stopped socializing altogether, racked by a devastating combination of depression and fear. She had nightmares that kept her up all night. Nightmares of the memories brought back by the mental invasion. Nightmares of the physical invasion of the ball of electric mayhem that had entered her abdomen. Nightmares of memories she couldn't quite remember. She was afraid they had experimented on her, removed an ovary for testing, or worse, impregnated her. She began to sense that there was far more to their story than they themselves knew. What had happened to them when they slept? They had been abducted. The angel had calmed them and apparently sedated them, somehow into sleep. And the next thing they remember is waking up back at camp like none of it ever happened. Elise developed a theory. Here is what she told Tom. Quote, I don't think we ever came down from the museum, Tom. We were on board the craft the whole time, and that's what my nightmares are about. Not the experience, the time after the experience, while we were sleeping. After some deep soul-searching and contemplation, they came up with a 2-step game plan. Step 1, return to the scene of the crime. And step 2, tell the tale.
Royalties.
That wasn't their plan at all to begin with. We'll get there.
That's plan 9 from outer space.
It's good therapy. I actually agree with that 2-step plan. It's good therapy in any situation like this. But let's get to what they did. These were both big decisions to make for the Giffords. A real getting back on the horse moment, if you will. They would return to the valley where it all happened. They would face their fears boldly, and they would challenge the power the experience was holding over them. It's a very good thing to do. Elise was hesitant to return to the campsite, but it didn't take her long to muster her gumption and agree to go back. I think she realized the helpfulness of it. Less than a week later, they were headed back out to the desert, wondering what fate may bring. They returned to the exact camping spot from the week before. They found their fire pit intact, and no physical signs of any alien invasion. The desert was pristine. However, they did both have some flashes of memory while they were there. Flashbacks to the abduction. They were nearly almost able to remember something from the lost time between meeting the angel and waking in the desert. But none of the images will come clear, just foggy impressions of things not quite understood. It is hard to say just what the Giffords were looking to find when they went back out to the Mojave, but it is sure they did not find it. At least not in that moment. 4 months later, they had not followed through with Phase 2, and they were still suffering the reality-shattering repercussions of their experience. Tom, who had always been Mr. Reliable at work, was now having troubles just showing up. His projects were all falling behind. His customers were beginning to complain. Elise's paranoia and depression had grown so bad she could barely get herself to leave the house. They were reaching a breaking point, and something had to give before their lives crumbled in the light of their shared inexplicable experience. They decided to implement Phase 2 of the plan.
Whiskey Pete's.
Dude, they totally should have gone to Whiskey Pete's before they went back to the campsite. They probably would have felt better about it.
But Woody had gone right to the police.
And really, they should have retraced the whole path. They should have gone to Whiskey Pete's and then slept in that same spot they did, then go back to the campground, then go back out to the where they camped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a bad concept, actually. Truly
Unless
retrace your
you
steps and
understand
rebuild the
psychology.
path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. From a psychological standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well.
Not just logistics, but psychological.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, so they finally decided to implement Phase 2 of the plan. They would tell those closest to them what they had experienced and let the chips fall as they may. First, they went to Elise's parents. Tom and Elise were forthcoming and told the story of their experience as truthfully and detailed as they could. The parents were entirely supportive, but equally as unaccepting of their truth. Then it was Tom's parents' turn. The results were not surprisingly very similar. I think it was Elise's dad. I didn't write this in my notes. One of the dads, I think it was Elise's dad, he went full on, oh, this is secret military stuff. Like he really came up with his own conspiracy theory for it. The rest of them were like, oh, we stand by you, honey. But they didn't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, they just straight up were like, okay, you're crazy, but that's okay. We still love you.
Yep.
One of the dads was like, oh, I totally believe that happened, but it wasn't aliens. It was the government.
Yeah. One of us.
So it was 3 non-believers, but very supportive, and one that believed you, but not for the same reason.
Yeah.
So telling the family didn't really convince anyone of their truth, but it at least let them know what was going on with Tom and Elise, because their parents had obviously noticed their changes in behavior, and it allowed for at least a bit of understanding. But the most fateful telling of the story was to Tom's best and oldest friend, Paul. Can I get some mad cujos for Paul, please?
Ah, down boy!
Why?
Thank you. Thank you. I'll tell you in a second.
Well, you're supposed to tell it and then give Mad Cujos.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Oh, is that the way it works?
Well,
you play Mad Cujos again?
do you want me to
after
do it
you say
again at the end? I'll do it again at the end if you want. For it was Paul that ratted the Giffords out to his other buddy, Ron Felber, who was a writer of books.
There you go.
The Giffords were none too happy when they found out the story had left the confidence of those they told directly. They had never intended for the story to get out to the world. They just wanted some healing through telling, their loved ones.
Did Paul use the real names?
I would doubt any of the names are real. I would think in a book like this, all the names are changed.
Well, no. I know that you said, I think that...
Oh, would Paul have told Ron Felber the real names? Oh, yeah, they meet. Like, there's a whole thing coming.
Okay.
There's a process here. But anywho, where was I? The Giffords were none too happy when they found out the story had left the confidence of those they told directly. But in the end, it was this telling that led to the Giffords learning the rest of their own story and allowing the world to know about the abduction. So good on you, Paul. That's why he got the Mad Cujos. Thanks for bringing the story to the world.
Down, boy!
But long story short, in return for letting Ron Felber, writer of the book that is really the only source for this encounter story, because they didn't want to talk to anybody else, for letting him write their story for the world to know, Mr. Felber puts the Giffords in touch with a world-renowned psychiatrist that specialized in treating people with post-traumatic stress and similar conditions. They would eventually get their meetings with the good Dr. Vatone. But before they got to that point, there was another fateful night for the Giffords and their ephemeral friends from unfamiliar realms. In the wee hours of the morning on December 18th, 1990, some 14 months after the initial encounter, the Giffords were still regularly sensing their watchers around them. It was as though they were under permanent observation since that night in the desert. And on this night, they were once again up close with these beings. Tom woke at 3:30 a.m., sensing them all around the bed. They were there. Elise sensed them too, but it was no longer a bother, no longer a threat. Their presence no longer bothered the Giffords. Tom and Elise both knew what the Watchers wanted, and they complied. The Giffords made love. When the act was done, they both knew the truth. Elise was now pregnant.
Is this a Star Child story or a fans-only thing? That's my question at this point.
It's definitely a Star Child story.
And a fans-only thing.
In the end. Oh, you mean OnlyFans?
I'm not good at this. I have to start searching more of that stuff. I'm on one of them pages, but...
It was 6 months later, when Elise was properly preggers, that the Giffords finally found themselves sitting in the office of Dr. Vatone at the National Center for Trauma in Georgetown, just outside Washington, D.C. The good doctor did an MLT-style deep dive interview with the Giffords about their experience in the Mojave. Over the course of 5 hours, he questioned the Giffords, asking them to recall every little detail of the experience for him.
Is it safe?
Yeah. In the end, he found the Giffords sane, honest, and in need of help to know the rest of their own story. In short, he believed them. Dr. Vatone referred the Giffords to an associate who specialized in retrogressive hypnosis for victims of trauma. If there was anyone who could help them remember these repressed memories, it would be this guy, Dr. William Annixter. As is typically the case with the American healthcare system, it took another 5 months before the Giffords were able to get an appointment with Dr. Annixter. In the meantime, Elise had given birth to a perfectly healthy baby girl, Ashley Elise. The child appeared normal in every way, but Elise sensed there was something more to her, something more human than human. She predicted that Ashley Elise would grow to know things about the invaders in the Mojave that others would never understand.
She's a Stewie Toonling.
Star child, baby. When Ashley Elise was just a baby, the Giffords were staying at a lake house that was in the family. One night, the stars seemed to come alive. A plethora of lights moving and blinking brought the sky alive with motion. When Elise sensed the presence of these lights, she took baby Ashley outside, under the clear night sky full of moving stars. And when she presented the baby to the sky, holding her on high all Lion King style, all the motion stopped. The sky was still once more. Apparently some curiosity had been addressed.
It's like when the mobile stops with the baby from Scully's Baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Total star child, dude. Star child. This made the Giffords all the more anxious for their meeting with Dr. Nixter, which happened just over a month later. After being put into a hypnotic state by Dr. Nixter, Tom and Elise were able to remember their lost time. Tom remembers the aliens coming into the camper to snatch them. He tries to resist, but it is, of course, no use. They are taken separately into the ship, led down long corridors of blue light into different chambers. They are both made to lie on what seem to be examination tables and surrounded by aliens. In Elise's case, she is inspected by a strange white alien that she describes as, quote, big head, real white. Skin so translucent it glows. But you can't see veins and things. I guess he's wearing a shiny covering too? I don't know what kind of material that is. I see something on his chest. It's like an arrow, just the top of an arrow. Just 3 fingers and a thumb. Real shiny, really long. I just hate his eyes. So dark you can't even see them. Can't see the parts like our eyes. They're big, then they go skinny at the ends. That tiny nose, practically just 2 holes. Little tiny mouth, but I don't think there are teeth or even lips. A little chin, no hair. Skinny body like a 5-year-old's, almost my height. The alien holds its hand above Elise's face about 5 inches away from her skin and slowly runs its hand down the length of her body as though scanning her in some way. Then it takes a device and presses it against her neck. Elise describes the device as a silver wand with 2 tiny openings on the end. She feels a quick shock. Remember the 2 marks on her neck that she thought were needle marks the day after? There you go.
Got to get the vampire genre in here somewhere.
Right. She is not able to recall anything beyond that. Dr. Nixter then turns his attentions back to Tom. Tom's experience with what I assume to be the alien scientists or doctors of some kind was a bit different from Elise's, but maybe more in line with what some people would expect to happen in these situations. Tom is laid on a table much like Elise, but instead of a little silver wand being pressed against his neck, he describes, quote, an examination probe with an instrument. They insert it in my body cavity. I remember fighting. It hurts. Pain in my anus and lower stomach. Yep, that's right, Moz. Good old-fashioned alien anal probing. Only took us 49 episodes to get there.
Yeah, I already said I did Cologuard. So,
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yep.
But anywho, both Tom and Elise are certain that at least part of what the aliens did to them was implant tracking devices. They are being constantly monitored and tracked by these creatures. So this concludes the background portion of our episode, which brings us to the theory section. So any questions or comments or anything before we get into the theory section here, Moss?
How was this relayed from the friend to the author, and how did this information come about? Did it come from regression therapy? Did it come from their memory, and the friend is then telling the author? How does the friend relay this entire book with all these details? I mean, obviously...
I'll give you the breakdown as I remember it from the book. I don't have it written down and stuff, but basically they tell Paul in what is supposed to be confidence about this encounter. But he sees how it's like wrecking him, like the real effect it's having on him and stuff. And he's a guy that's like, you really need to tell this story. You really need to seek some professional help. And they're like, we don't want to talk to anyone we don't know about this, basically. But basically, Paul tells Ron, hey, I have these friends with this story that I think they should tell the world. And they really, if you could help them with this other stuff, like find them some help to deal with the trauma of it in return, maybe they'll tell you the story. So Ron agrees to meet up with them. Paul brings Ron to the Giffords. They meet, they tell the story. Ron finds them credible. And they agree to tell, after they were very upset with Paul for telling the story to an outsider, basically. But in the end, when, at first they're pretty upset about it, but then when he says, hey, this guy can actually get you in touch with these doctors, get you in front of these doctors. So they were kind of bribed into telling the author the story with the fact that he could connect them with the help that they needed to deal with the trauma. That's essentially it. And as far as their memories go, it's pretty much how it's laid out here. They remembered.
Yeah, they were just trying to go get some of the other spots they couldn't remember
right
through this other.
They both totally remembered in the same detail. You could put them in different rooms. They tell you the same story over and over again of the actual encounter story up to that point where they fall asleep.
Right.
And then neither of them remembered anything until they woke up back at the campsite. And it was the hypnosis that brought back those memories of when they were sleeping and getting, when they get examined and probed and all that. So that's basically how it all breaks down. We'll get a little bit more into that as we go too. But good question, good establishing question, and we'll get deeper into that as we get into the theories now. So first thing that comes to mind theory-wise when looking at the possible reasons behind these aliens' actions is what I would think of as the Promethean theory, or what I might also call the 2001 theory. This is that these creatures are here to directly involve themselves in the evolution of humankind. They are, a little at a time, altering our genetics so as to directly influence our evolution. But to what end are they doing this? And how could we possibly know? But it is something that comes to mind here. The whole Star Child thing. Why are they altering these children for the next generation, But this theory is tangential to and possibly overshadowed by the possibility that it is a little bit more sinister and more of a scientist/lab rat sort of relationship, as I kind of hinted at a few times throughout. This would be the human laboratory theory.
The laboratory monster.
Not the third switch.
Not the third switch.
In which these aliens are basically roving scientists out collecting data, and the Giffords are the rats that they have chosen to examine
in their laboratory.
I'm having too much fun with that. It is also what I currently consider to be my leading theory. I like the scientist/lab rat. It seemed so much like they were just scientifically experimenting on these people. The story, of course, focuses on what was happening to the Giffords, but there is something seemingly significant going on in the background. That giant probe that is collecting all sorts of samples from the desert. We spoke of it only briefly in our story earlier, so let me focus in on it here for a moment. Here is an excerpt from the book. There were properties the probe possessed, unlike any he had ever imagined. Tom noticed now for the first time. Following in the wake of this searcher, that's the platform that it lowered, that we mentioned earlier, which he judged to be a kind of homing device to identify and locate, the probe cut a swath of radiance through the night. And now he could see that it was not simply objects that the probe was retrieving, but elements, fine showers of particles being drawn up from the ground. It was a laser of some kind, Tom believed, doing massive drilling at some extreme level deep within the earth. Well, it sounds like they're mining out some kind of particular element, like they're refueling out of our element base on the earth here.
Aliens versus cowboys.
Or aliens versus cowboys. But it sounds like a scientific data collecting mission to me there. Or maybe just material gathering, like a straight up mining expedition. This would play into Tom's theory that these visitors have been coming to the Mojave for time out of mind. You know, Moss? Because if there's resources there that they need, and they know they can just kind of come back and grab it as they need it, that would explain a lot, don't you think? But this leads into the potential of the human zoo theory as well. They were apparently being collected along with all the other things to see in the desert and then examined, probed, and chipped. Are they the newest addition to the menagerie in the alien zoo? Or maybe the aliens' next reality TV show just started? Do you think they have reality TV in the fourth dimension there, Moss?
Yeah, possible.
Never
I mean,
know.
they're monitoring ours, or at least that one race was in Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, there you go. But that brings us to my Ahul Guano theory of the week.
Well,
do you have any other theories?
I wanted to set the tone before, I made a lot of movie references and jokes because it seems like just a combination of all of the movies and all of the things that have ever happened, Frankenstein together. Hey, it's the one movie I didn't mention is Frankenstein, but it was Frankenstein together to create this script is what it sounds like. It does have an hallucinatory effect, but even a dream, I don't know how you can have this many memories from that one night. Most people don't remember it. There's bits and pieces. It just has kind of all the tropes from, hallucinations are routinely interpreted as possession by good or evil spirits. So they did both. They had the angels and the demons. They have the gremlins and I mean, even just from a logistical standpoint of taking over an entire valley to catch two campers. If I'm the general, I'm thinking, we got them now. We got 1,000. We got them surrounded. I knew they were going to leave Whiskey Pete's. I knew it.
Yeah.
So it seems like, you've got tractor beams. You've just got all the tropes from the sulfur to the operating room to the angels to the demons to the dream paralysis to the astral attack to the experimentation to the baby, the star child.
You forgot anal probe.
Yeah, it's all the tropes. It's basically all the tropes. And it seems, if there isn't these doctors, if no one, and I know to your credit, you've said, I'm just going to read this book and do a book review. And you told me that from the beginning. But at the same time, it's like, wow. And I don't know, I guess it wasn't, because they couldn't get any in question anymore and there was no other leads, that this isn't one that's talked about as often because it's their account, take it or leave it as it is.
Yep.
But it seems to me to, it even had the fog. I think I mentioned 3 John Carpenter movies during that. So it's like, it does seem...
Yeah, like, the fog with the drugging effect.
Well, even the fog in the desert is not horribly often. I've been living in the desert for a long time. I've seen fog in the desert a few times in a few places. It doesn't happen that often.
Not that often.
Yeah, I mean it can obviously depending on where you're at,
the right
how much
time
water's around, and what elevation you're at.
Right.
But it isn't a thing that happens. A ton.
It's not every day.
You're not driving through the desert often and having a fog problem.
Right.
You're just not.
Right.
It's just not, even if you're going off-roading.
Short periods of time under just the right weather circumstances.
But we had all the right circumstances for all the right things to happen. Passing through the barrier to get into the valley that was being monitored.
I feel like we're going to fight later.
Yeah.
But let me do my Ahul Guano theory of the week. Oh no, here it comes. Quick, to the batshit signal. Okay, I call this one the Mojave K Ultra theory. Basically, I'm going with Elise's dad. It wasn't aliens, it was the government. So there was a point when this came into my mind, and I was thinking maybe instead of this being an alien experiment on the Giffords, what if it was a governmental experiment on the Giffords? The Mojave is rife with secret government bases and operations, and I wondered if the right course of drugs and hypnosis could cause a shared experience memory like this. That was debunked by the trauma doctor who said that shared memories cannot be created through use of drugs alone. And the Giffords seemed otherwise completely sane and without any clinical mental illness. So then I wondered, what if they were drugged, abducted, placed in a sensory deprivation tanks, and rigged up with full-body VR suits that would feed them all the shared experiences, and the drugs would make the memories seem real and whole. They drugged them, dragged them, suited them, floated them in the tanks, and fed them a memory and controlled their access to that memory somehow. Sounded to me like something those MK Ultra guys would cook up, and it may just be crazy enough to work. It is definitely crazy enough to be my Ajo Guano theory of the week, though. So against my better judgment, I wrote it down and shared it with the world. What do you think about that, Maz?
Or
you
just
can poop on it now.
Transcranial electrostimulation. You don't have to go that far. You just have to shock the car a little bit and make those things happen. Your Ajo Guano theory makes more sense than all this happening in a night. So in some ways, this is, I'm saying this is either a hallucination, this is either some type of, if it is true, if you're willing to go to that next leap, then there's something more going on here, like what you have for an Ajo Guano file, where someone is just simply inundating you with, we always talk about portals. What if the portal is interactive and you're now watching a movie? You're viewing something they're showing you, or they got into their brains. They're shooting the image into their brains. The telepathy, these folks were controlled throughout. They had that trope as well.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. With the telepathy, you could just make them think that all those other creatures were there.
All those other things happened.
There could have been one creature there, just making them think all that other stuff was going on.
If something like this, from their perspective, is true, it's something more like that than all those that more than 3 or 4 movies combined happened in a night.
That's an X-Files episode right there. One creature making you think you're being swarmed by an army.
But just even the X-Files,
that's interesting.
They hit every single X-File trope. It's
yeah. So you think that makes it less or more believable then?
Well, it happened in 1989, 1990, so it's right around the beginning of when the X-Files started, right before. So
because X-Files started 91?
Can I do my Ajo Guano theory?
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was
I have it now. No, I'm just commenting on yours. I
like the theory you came up with coming up.
No, I came up with a theory because you just asked me a question about when the X-Files came up, this is right before the X-Files started to come out. So my Ajo Guano theory is his name is not Tom Gifford. It's Christopher Carter. He is the producer of the X-Files, and he made the X-Files to try to figure out what happened to him that night. This is all just a therapy course, those 9 seasons.
Whoa.
And then he wakes up with Suzanne Plachette at the end, and he doesn't have an inn in Vermont.
What year was Chris Carter born?
I'll have to look that up.
We're going to have to look that up.
Was he the inspiration? Was he the inspiration for Spider-Man? You also have to just do something like that.
Hey, we found Batman. Why not? Old business. Chris Carter.
But
and we're going to do a little homework on that.
There you go.
Oh yeah, Ajo Guano. That's why it got so weird in here. Let's shift gears and jump into Sir Richard Scully Muggle Skeptics Review.
You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
Oh, now I just realized that's what I did. That's why I was waiting patiently, and I should have waited a little more patiently. I Scully Muggled this prematurely.
Oh, that's
Premature
all right.
Scully Muggleization hasn't happened here yet.
It's all right. You can let me do my skeptics thing, and then if you want to expound on yours in regards to this, maybe you can culminate a full skeptical theory. How about that?
Yeah.
So for this segment, I actually bring you the abstract of a paper published by the National Library of Medicine, link in the show notes. I'm going to read this, Maz, and then I'm going to ask you to unpack it for us, okay? The title of the paper is Memory Distortion in People Reporting Abduction by Aliens. False memory creation was examined in people who reported having recovered memories of traumatic events that are unlikely to have occurred. Abduction by space aliens.
And cowboys.
Versus space aliens. A variant of the Diess-Roediger-McDermott paradigm was used to examine false recall and false recognition in 3 groups. People reporting recovered memories of alien abduction, people who believe they were abducted by aliens but have no memories, and people who deny having been abducted by aliens. Those reporting recovered and repressed memories of alien abduction were more prone than control participants to exhibit false recall and recognition. The groups did not differ in correct recall or recognition. Hypnotic suggestibility, depressive symptoms, and schizotypic features were significant predictors of false recall and false recognition. In your own words, Maz, what did that say?
Which part? Let's get the last part, like So hypnotic suggestibility, depressive symptoms, and schizotypic, which is either schizoid or schizotypal. It's kind of a personality thing where they're fairly introverted folks. Basically, it's saying if you have some of these pre-emotional issues or mental health concerns, or hypnotic suggestibility is the other piece that we might all, they're more suggestible as they come back. If they believed that they were more likely to kind of recall something that really didn't happen.
More likely to have false recall or false memories.
Yeah, it has like an imagination thing. They have a more creative imagination, and they can kind of recall that stuff, and they kind of are not going to be the control group who didn't think they had anything to do with aliens. Obviously won that match from the Carl Sagan Club, the Scully Muggle land.
Right.
But the other ones were more susceptible to, coming up with some, fictional story about what happened.
Yep.
They may believe it. I don't want to say that.
But that's what the skeptics would say when faced with one of these things is, that didn't really happen. You're just making it up. You're believing things didn't happen.
I did want to talk about Betty and Barney Hill. I mean, that's exactly what they were. It's one of the big ones, one of the big famous accounts. And it started a lot of this, and again, a lot of these same tropes are in there, but they're in a lot of other things. It was the sheer volume of things that happened to me that seemed
fair enough.
So
fair enough,
off the rails. But Betty and Barney Hill, basically, they said because how it was handled and because of how she didn't, Betty particularly seemed to remember more and more later. They think the hypnosis and the regression therapy, and they kind of, in some ways. It's a little hypnosis is dubious to begin with, but they're really concerned that they created some of these memories for her as this whole thing kind of got drawn out, and she was under more and more, scrutiny and regression therapy and all this stuff. So
right,
and that we clearly have people who are real, and we clearly have doctors who we can interview, and we clearly have a story. And this one, it's a take it or leave it moment by an author who, kind of did his thing.
Yeah, and on that note, I do have another bit in my skeptics notes here that the skeptics would also note that no one but Mr. Felber, a struggling writer at the time, was the only one to ever supposedly hear the Giffords story outside of their family. And Gifford isn't even their real name. They were given pseudonyms for the book. No other source has ever been found for the story directly. So it would be completely understandable that the people who experienced this abduction wouldn't want their identities known to the world. They would be hounded by the press, the mad horde of alien chasers out there would never leave them alone. They would never get away from the attention it would bring. But it also gives the skeptics a reason to wonder if the whole thing isn't just a giant fabrication to sell some books. Mm-hmm. That question's going to get asked when you approach something like this. So that's actually something you were touching on earlier too, I think. But that brings us to the Scully Mulder believability scale.
They feel your methods, your theories are
spooky. Do you think I'm spooky?
Wait, why am I Scully?
We mentioned it in the last one, I think, but we've been talking about come season 2. I don't think the believability scale is going to be a segment anymore. But
you wanted to officially break it today. That's why you did this one.
Well, no, today, actually, this is one that I think is perfect to actually have the believability scale.
I agree with
It's
you.
a good last use.
I agree with you.
Because this is an episode where it works.
Yes.
Do you believe this happened or not?
Correct.
You can actually judge this one, I think.
Correct.
And I think we're going to be a little different. I'm going to let you go first, though, Ma.
Well, I would think anybody from the UFO world would probably, and I don't know what they've said about this one or not. It's obviously not in the Schreiber, Walton, Hill camp. It's not mentioned very often. So people probably looked at this with a kind of a little bit of a...
There's a lot of salt on this one. Lots of grains.
Yeah, and I kind of I'm guessing that's what the UFO community would say when they see everything that they've ever read about kind of thrown into... And sex sells, by the way, and of course they had to have the sex parts.
There is a little. It's not that heavy on it, but it is an element.
It has everything. It has a little bit of everything. A little sprinkling of glitter man everywhere.
It's got a little glimmer on it. But it is a fun book. It's a good read. It's got religion in there too. He definitely added an element of religion to it.
Yeah, well, you got angels and demons, and again, the common tropes are you usually see something angelic or demonic, which is the portal guardians, which is what I call the Ishta Diva or the Ishta Raksha, and they did both. And it seems like that was the thing. It's like, well, I don't want to narrow it down. I kind of want to use that. Let's just do both. Let's do all, and let's watch. Let's go to back then. It was Blockbuster when he did this. He went to Blockbuster. He rented everything in the science fiction section. And then he wrote a book that kind of hit on, most of these themes. Now, however, the only reason I'm going to say 2 instead of 0 is because I think that there's a possibility that these folks experienced this and that there was almost more Urahuguanophile. There's a reason for it. Something was going on. They were inundated. They were tested. They were thrown at. It's almost like Clockwork Orange. Your eyes are open and you're watching this stuff, and they're just reacting to what you're seeing, and somebody's learning from this, and that is possible. They were telepathy was happening. All this could have been injected into their brains. Haven't heard it quite like this. It seems like it was crafted more into a story for me than anything else. But I'm going to give it a 2, and I don't even know who they are because and I don't blame them for not coming forward, but.
It's one of the conundrums in the believability of it. Is it more or less believable that they never really came
what
forward?
Did he talk about Dr. Nixter? Does he say, I'm making this up or not? I mean, that's another important point to this, that there's doctors he's protecting, or we don't really know, or we don't want to get sued, so we don't use these names. I don't know the answer.
He does name one of them as the director of a real place at a certain time. So if we can find out who the director of that place was at that time, we'll see if the name was changed.
Yeah, it would be interesting. If anybody...
If it's actually that name, then that will give credence anyway, right?
Because I think this was mentioned on Coast to Coast AM at some point. So I think
I'm sure it was. I couldn't give you the episode or anything, but I'm sure I heard it on there at one point.
But this is so fantastical that... And again, that leads me to what Carl Sagan would say. Great claims, require great evidence, and this is one of those cases where we got nothing. We got this great story,
right?
And we've got nothing else. And it's such a great story that it's.
Well, there's 2 people, but it's a married couple. That doesn't really count as verification, does it?
Well,
it's like one person at that point sharing the story.
But these shared things do happen.
Yes.
And with Betty and Barney, it certainly seemed that I'll say this about Betty and Barney, I don't think they disbelieve each other, and I think something weird happened, and I think the 2 of them believe, but did they help each other remember and recreate, and did the regression therapists make it worse, and the hypnosis? Right. I don't know. This case, we don't know who we're dealing with. It just sounds like a John Carpenter kind of production.
Yeah. You know me, man. I like to believe stuff.
I know.
I'm going to give it a 6.
There you go. For you, that's low. So.
For me, that's a little low.
Yeah.
And for me, it's again, I'm not the guy who's going to say I know all the answers and I know these were actual aliens and blah blah blah. I just think someone actually experienced this experience. It could just as well as, but like you said, it could just as well as be my Mojave K Ultra Ahuguano theory as it is interstellar beings, or it could be interdimensional beings, or it could. I mean, I touched on the whole simulation theory thing. It's like they're from a competing program in the simulation. Like it could literally be any of that,
right?
But something happened to these people. I don't think Ron Felber just made that up. I think someone brought him the story, and he wrote it. That's what I think.
But I'll just put it this way: if this is real and physical, then somebody went through a whole lot of trouble to ruin a camping trip. And it's just like, come on, Felly. Hey, what are the next 17 planets doing this weekend? Because I know where the Giffords are going to be camping this week.
That's one thing to me is people who go through these things like to think that it was them for a reason and it makes them special. Like I said, my favorite theory was the scientist lab rat. I think those guys were coming to collect materials out of the desert like they've been doing for time out of mind. And they were like, oh, look, humans. Let's probe them. Let's prod them. Let's poke them and see what happens.
But
see what we can learn from
all these little elements you're saying could be very true and are related to other accounts of people we've spoken to and have gone under, have had stress debriefings and have been spoken to, professionals who can comment on it and are been interviewed. I think this is, you're pointing to these elements that might have, I think he swept these elements into one thing.
Gotcha.
And that,
it's, I'm being devil's advocate.
No,
a little bit. Well, you're being, I guess we're being each other's devil's advocates, really, in a way. I don't hardcore believe this one. I just like to give people the benefit of the doubt.
I'm Elliot.
I should maybe just give it a 5. I'm still way above you though at a 2. And it could have been our first 0. Have we ever done a 0?
I was going to go for 0, but the other piece of this is this: if someone experienced something, and these folks are real, and they were abused, and these things were traumatic, I'm not really looking to upset them furher. And again,
Correct.
this is part of the reason. This is part of the reason why we're doing away with the believability scale. I think it has a lot of. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. Who are we to judge? It's a complicated kind of thing.
Yep. So. I think that was a very good one for the last time for the believability scale.
Yep. You broke it, is what you did.
We will be having.
Can I change it to a 0 just so we could break the believability scale?
Sure.
I'm going to lower it, not for them because I don't know what happened. I wasn't there that night. I'm low. I stayed at Whiskey Pete's. You remember?
Make it the square root of -1.
I'm going to make it the square root of -1.
Oh yeah.
And we've just broken the scale.
You just broke space time.
Believability scale
broken. Gone. To be replaced by another segment in season 2.
Yeah, because we just want to make a new bumper. We want to work on a new bumper. We haven't done one in a long time.
It's true. I would like to make a new bumper.
Yeah. That's the fun part.
All right, and that brings us to Wolfman Puck's Scripted Culinary Corner.
Your entree, sir. Smells good.
So, for today's Wolfman Puck's Scripted Culinary Corner, we have the very special basket ingredient of the ephemeral Glimmerwudgie.
Yay.
The little gremlin monkey things.
Red eyes.
I figure they're the ones that are more numerous. They seem wild animal-y, so, might make for a good
And they're
feast.
free range, it seems.
Definitely free range, yes. They were all over the place.
Red eyes at night, sailor's delight. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So, would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first, Ma?
I am prepared. And instead of scrapple, I'm running all these things over with like a giant Hummer and making like a corn. And I'll pick up the ones that I hit. This is a roadkill kind of thing going.
Just cruising through the desert, running over gremlins.
They're everywhere. There were, this was like a Peter Jackson production. So they were all over the desert.
Yeah,
so I'm just going to run over some of them. And I'm making corned gremlin hash and eggs kind of thing with every spice in the rack to kill the sulfur smell. So I'm just going to throw whatever's on the spice rack into that thing. Now, here's the clincher, though. And it's a trick beer serving pairing.
Okay.
I'm giving Oberon Ale from Bell's Brewing, which is in Michigan. And you might be thinking, why are you going all the way to Michigan? It was abducted and brought here firstly, but it's mostly in honor of Art Bell from Pahrump, Nevada, not far from where this happened, and Oberon, the king of the fairies. So I did like a Wolfman Puck Ahu Guano mishmash, so I'm calling it a mishmash hash.
Mishmash fairy hash because of the beer.
Yeah, mishmash fairy hash. Something had a bone. Oh, yeah. Let's go to Alex Bones.
Throw the gremlin a bone.
Yep.
Huh. That's actually pretty tasty. I always like the corned beef hash.
Corned gremlin.
Corned Glimmerwudgie.
Different. I tried to do a spam thing, but there was really no acronym I could work with gremlins. So I worked on this pretty hard, but harder than reading the.
Well done. Well done. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a Mojave desert-themed dish for the location. This will be cooked in an iron fry pan over an open fire under a clear desert sky at sunset because ambiance matters. Get your pan all nice and hot over the fire and throw in some pinon pine nuts and some mesquite beans to start roasting. Add a little Glimmerwudgie fat to keep from burning. and for some flavor, of course. Then you dice up the Glimmerwudgie meat, put aside until the nuts and beans are properly roasted. In the meantime, prepare an agave and prickly pear jam. When it is time, add the Glimmerwudgie meat to the pan. When the meat is properly cooked, I'm going to guess it turns white, goes from like translucent to white. That's just a guess. Add in the jam and stir until even and smooth. Then you throw all that in a bowl and eat it while it's steamy.
Wow.
Oh man, my mouth is watering. That actually sounds really good.
Yeah.
And for the accompanying beverage, some old rat ale from Bravery Brewing in the Western Mojave. This, of course, in honor of us getting abducted once the visitors smell our feast, and we can get a turn to be the rats in their cage. See, old rat ale, we get to be the rats in the cage. It's made in the Mojave.
Despite all my rage.
Yep. So what do you think of that, Moss?
There you go. I think
pretty
I
good.
won, but okay.
I think this is one where I actually want to be at both of these dinners.
Well, what if we give you the last one, because you really did win.
It's all right. I won last week. Right?
Well, we didn't establish that. I said it was a tie.
I was trying to sneak that in.
I'm gonna give you that one, but I'm taking this one.
You're going to give me the last one?
It's a trade.
But,
yeah.
But you're going to take this one?
Yeah, because I thought my saucer section thing was pretty clever.
That
but
was pretty good.
At the end of the day, you were for off the cuff. And
how about we flip it and you can have the last one and I'll take this one. That way we win our own episodes. Ooh. It's easier to keep track of that way. Not that we keep track.
That's true. All right, deal. You know, when you said fireplace, though, I actually believe I've solved this.
Oh, yeah?
All right, real quickly. You said fire, and you're setting this little fire to make the Wolfman Puck kind of, I mean, to make the wolf.
I'm basically making it at their campsite where they got abducted.
Correct. They had a fire. What if there's a peyote plant that was laying in the fire pit?
Oh.
And they just lit it on fire. They stared at the fire.
And then they sat over
They drank
the
their
fire.
wine. And the rest of the night
And they tripped balls for the next 24 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
There you go. Hey, the believability scale, bring that thing back.
Let me see that again. Bring that over here.
Oh, wait, the smoking man's wheeling it down that big aisle right now.
Yeah, it's gone. It's gone. The Manangal ate it.
Yeah. Good
flew
times.
away with its guts.
Sweet.
Anywho, that's all for this one. Join us in the side trail where we're going to actually get into more theories, connections, and general weirdness regarding the Mojave Incident. It's going to be one of the side trails. It's just a straight continuation of the episode, basically. And thanks, everybody, for coming, man. This has been a really fun year. We got our season finale coming up in 2 weeks, and then there's going to be a month of interviews and compilations and things like that. And then we'll be back with season 2 in September. I'm kind of proud of us, Moz. We actually made it through a whole year of this stuff.
Without killing each other.
An episode a week. Yeah, without killing each other. That's impressive.
Yep.
That's impressive. Especially with how long we sit here staring at each other in the garage sometimes.
And when he runs out of beer or weed, it gets ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. When it's the beer, you get ugly, and when it's the weed, I get ugly.
Yeah. Yep.
Anywho, anything else to add us or Bert before we go there, Moss?
Nope.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/monsterlore tour. You can join for as little as $1 a month. Episodes are also public there, so you can listen to us either way on the Patreon. We have our Side Trail compilation next week for the last 3 for this episode and the previous 2. Then is our big season finale. Then we'll have that break and be back in September with Owl Week. Oh, yeah. Moz is going to do owls, everybody. It's going to be fantastic. And Owl Week is a month long.
Culminating in an us file about owls.
Yeah.
Sorta.
Going to get a lot of us files in that one. So thanks for coming along with the Monster Lore Tour, everybody. Until then, to all of my fellow paranerdalists out there, have a good one. Monster Lore Tour Podcast.
Fans only or only fans? Which is it?
Only
I gotta get it right next time.
Only
this is important.
fans.
Only fans.
Shut